This is Smith Welding. I'm Adam Niffen. I'm your host. Stroll around the shop with us. Check out what we got in here today. It's always fun and interesting. Okay, here we are with the tub. We got a bunch of tacks started along here. This, you can see, it's all gonna get tapped down. This seam's actually got to get cut so they're laced together. We did a seam over there and a seam in here. So this is where we're at on the sand rail. Right now, we got a shock. See how it fits down there in the cup. And up here, what they had were those little tabs. Little tabs, that style shock. So we're getting into a little fabricating. All right, I'm gonna show you how I did this, came about this. I knocked out a perfect little triangle, 33.3 triangle, and then we tacked it in place. I tacked it in place, you can see where we hit it. We zapped it right there. So it ran parallel right in the middle of this bar, parallel, okay? I went around the back side. I butted that into it, and I marked on each side of this rubber right here is where it's got to line up. And that gave me a space about that far apart, about 1.5 inches apart. 2 dots. Scribe those straight across. It gave me a straight line. That's why we have this odd looking triangle. The idea is, okay, so I got it cut. I got it cut with Old Faithful. Okay. Cleaned up the dross. Got it to where I could actually cut templates off of it, right? Or use it as a template to cut pieces off of. Then I clamped them together. So now the symmetry's there, all right? They're all cleaned up. Edges are rounded off. The outside pieces actually have a little burr right there. We can take care of that with a file. We don't care. So now we go over here. If I'm not mistaken, we fit in here about like this. Or it's like this. Nope, that ain't right. We fit in here about like this. See, I gotta juke it around and make sure I got the right one. I didn't mark my template like a jackass. That should be my shock mount right there. It connects into the bottom here. At the bottom, I'm gonna put a plate. So basically we'll have 2 of these set up. We'll have them set up like this, and there'll be a plate running between them. We'll drill that hole in, take aviation guidelines. It'll be a 3/8 hole, so it's going to be 3/4 from the end. It'll actually be 1 inch from the end. It'll be centered 3/4 from each side. This will be 1.5 inches space between the 2 pieces. It'll be 1.5 inches space between the 2 pieces when we tack them up, and then we can mount it. That plate will be on the bottom because all that force from that suspension is going to be forcing it up. So we wanted this gusseted to receive that shock. So all that force is coming up right in the middle of that tube. And then after that, should be able to bring our sheet metal back and around. You can see here, I took and I had a line. I had a line figured from this point to where it hits down here. And I actually started hammering it with a mallet and a couple of my domed mallets there. So I got a lot of walnuts in here. So I got to hammer and dolly this, but I brought it around so it lines up here, it lines up down there. I ran it long. So we got to cut this off right in the middle of that rail like that. So when we weld this across, we can metal finish it. It looks seamless. This actually bows in. We got the other side to bow in the same way. I think it looks pretty tough for a little sand rail job. We got some holes up there to cut. We got a dash mocked up. We're going to channel it up over that little bit of tubing frame. We got a transmission tunnel. There you go, folks. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to John here in a second. Fucking grease monkey here. We got this one tacked. We pulled all of our geometry off of the shock itself. This part of the suspension is in its lowest position. The shock itself was in its lowest position, so they can set their suspension from there. It's just tacked in place. Now, look at this. Just look at this. I'm going to answer a couple questions as you're looking at it. How the fuck do I get this geometry? The way this torsion setup is, this is in the full up position. You can't mount it to the shock, mock it up, and do it. You've got to actually, it's a loaded suspension, so you have to push this down. Ratchet straps, whatever. How do we get the geometry? Alright, so we got John on the camera. I showed you him. We're looking at the geometry of the suspension and why I did this the way I did it. We got this all mocked up where it's flat, straight, even. It's a good deal. We came up with this particular gusseted design out of 11 gauge for durability sake. It's welded inside and out with a big 220 welder, so it's not going anywhere. The frame structure will get welded with the big welder. Probably inside and tacked outside and tacked inside when we're done. It'll get a continuous weld outside and tacked inside. Probably. Alright, so this side, we got it set up right now. How do we get this number is what the question is. I measured from here down. I got 7 1/8. Okay, to that point. Right down there. From here to here is 7 1/8. From here to here is 3/4 of an inch. Here to here is 3/4 of an inch. It's set there pretty square. Now over here, we made a mark at 7 1/8. We're there. We made a mark at 3/4. We're there. Okay, now we've got the swivel. Where does it land on a 360-degree radius? I had to measure this beam. This is the only thing I could find to square it off from. So I measured from outside of tube, across here. It was, I want to say 38.5. This. And we radius that in, what they call a radius measurement. We radius that in from here to this point. It's 17 and 13/16 to this point, to this mark, the dead center of this. So we'll take that number and bring it over here. So now we got this. We're going to pull right here. We're going to pull over. Boom. We're at our number. We're at our number. We're at our numbers. We got all 4 numbers. 3/4 here, here, 7 1/8 here, 7 1/8 here, 17 and 13/16. I'm going to tack it in place. We'll be able to tack it in place. We'll grind those tacks down so we get a good continuous weld. And this should be able to put up the abuse. It's getting a 1600cc Volkswagen motor on this. Should be able to stand up to that abuse after that. What we had before, I showed you were those little, what were they, 12 gauge, 14 gauge tags that were worthless. There you go. Thinner steel. There was a tag on each side that received the eye bolt like this. It was set up like this before on both ends. Had one of those. Now we got to receive this bushing and shit. That's where we're at. We'll come back in a bit. Alright, so we got a lot of spot welds all done, ready to clean up like this. This all cleaned up. We are going to do a little bit of filler, okay? Bucket, whatever. This panel came out real nice. There's some walnuts on it. We're going to grind a lot of that out. It's 16 gauge steel, people. Come on. We're going to seam steel some other things that just aren't reasonable to get at with a welder. Shock mounts, of course, came out fabulous. I showed you guys the geometry on those, which to you would be 15 seconds ago. To me, it was 7 hours ago. Since I knew what was going on that side, I knew how to pull this template and make this piece work far better. The owner and company came over, got the suspension, tie rods and shit set up. If you look down in there, they got it all, the linkages all drawn in. We got wheels again. This is Brian here, you're seeing the back side of. We got the slots cut. What's gonna end up happening is the bottom side and all this inside, we're just gonna bed line it. We'll seam seal it. I got some panel adhesive where we've got small gaps. We're gonna put panel adhesive in for rattle barrier. That's the start of our hood. Here, let me flip this back real quick. I'll show you what we got going on. I built that today. Got it rounded in there. There's some walnuts in there. John ground out most of the walnuts that were in there. It's gonna take minor bits of filler, shit that's we're not gonna have to worry about coming out again. Right now, what I'm doing, you know, you do the one side the hard way. You do the other side, if it works, off of a template. I'm gonna cut this template off of here. I'm gonna flip it over there, see how it works. Canopy. I got the middle piece inset. Got this bent. A little bit of hammer and mallet work, but not much. It's coming out great. We got to figure out the rest of the hood and the transmission tunnel. Transmission tunnel's coming out of 20 gauge.
What time are you down there?
Oh, there you are, folks. We got the dash pot here ready to go. It's all tacked together. We'll do the cup holder section. Don't ask. I don't know. Probably gonna get all these in one big swath of destruction. I haven't put any videos of this up yet. Alright. New shop, new projects. We're out to go, folks.